Well, let's get the latest now. We speak to Ovigwe Eguegu, who is an international geopolitical security analyst based in Abuja, Nigeria. He's kept a close eye on the developments in Burkina Faso, and he joins us now to speak about what's happening there and in the region. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Have we heard any information as of yet where the president is and if he is secure wherever he is?
Well, as of now, the information out is in a safe location. That is the official statement coming from the junta, and they, of course, would want to put such a message out to start the process of calming, the street, because, mind you, Roch Kabore was actually elected, so he still, of course, has some supporters who might get restive and agitated, knowing fully well that he has been deposed. So I believe the statement of the military is the first step to establishing calm on the streets. Meanwhile, there's a lot of celebration on the street as well. So it's just very crucial that this coup, if you look at the build-up, it wasn't meant to be bloody. So I don't think the intent was to kill him or his members of the cabinet, but in as much as possible to keep this as bloodless as possible. That is why we are seeing that statement that he and other senior members of his government are in a safe and secure location. Of course, that means they will not be used for bargaining chips going forward.
It's interesting that you should say that there was a tweet that was attributed to President Kabore urging those who have taken power to hand it back. And this is against the backdrop of the government denying that there has been a coup at all. Yet there have also been reports that there have been members of the military in balaclavas even at the state broadcaster. Is it a coup? Isn't it a coup? And why is there confusion around this?
I think what you're saying is a large ditch effort by President Kabore and his team to try to dissuade the junta from going on with what they've already done, because it is evidently clear with that state broadcast that we saw not so long ago that this coup is done and dusted. However, it's been a very slow build up, and it's not as swift as what we saw, for instance, in Guinea or even in Chad. So the slowness of it is why you still see the confusion. But if we look at who really has the reins of power, looking at the information put out by the state broadcaster, where you had military officials in their fatigue making this announcement, dissolving the cabinet, and you're not seeing like a counter coup from other factions of the military. It shows that the military is acting as a unit, not necessarily 100% in support, but as of yet, there's no division within the military. So what you then have is political elements, of the state architecture, and that is where Roch Kabore and some of the members of senior officials would try, of course, to put out conflicting statements going forward.
You mentioned the fact that there were celebrations in part following the coup, and we have seen protests of late against President Kabore and his administration because of the insecurity. We've seen members of the police and civilians being attacked, who've been made vulnerable, according to what they say, being left without resources. There was the attack in Inata that occurred as well. And some of these attacks are attributed to militants who have links to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. Is President Kabore seen as lacking the ability to rein in this militancy?
See, we have to follow Burkina Faso's arc from about 2015 when Roch Kabore came onto the stage. It was out of a protest, an uprising, that we had elections in Burkina Faso and Roch Kabore was elected. As at the time he was taking office, the security situation in Burkina Faso, although sketchy, is nothing compared to what we see in Burkina Faso today. In the last 7 years, there's been a complete deterioration of security in Burkina Faso. And you would know that in West Africa, there's a part called the Tillabéri region, where it's a tri-border area between Niger Republic, Burkina Faso, and Mali. That is ground zero of terrorism in West Africa. And every so often we hear of reports, attacks after attacks, Burkina Faso, Burkinabe citizens, the military suffering losses after losses. And it is a situation that has deteriorated consistently over the last 7 years, and even more in the last couple of years. So I think what you see today are disgruntled officers who, of course, have seen their colleagues, seen their country and their countrymen, die on the battlefield and in their communities over and over again. So if you look at the situation Burkina Faso military is in, there's really been no real effort at the state level to really match the competence demand. And by competence, I don't just mean skill to fight wars, but also peace building effort and also equipment. So there are a lot of gaps in the military, even in its counter-terrorism strategy, that has made it very difficult for the Burkina Faso army to make progress on the war front. So that is why this uprising or the coup we see today started as a mutiny, where these soldiers were expressing their challenges that they face, and then you also have the civilians as well. So there is a concerted effort somewhat between the civilian populace and the military. So it shows that there's a lot of problems, deep structural problems in Burkina Faso that President Roch Kabore has failed, to address. So what we see, what's going to happen going forward will very much remains to be seen. But I think the political process has to be restored, because we've been down this road before, and it's not really clear if the current junta will be able to solve the problems. And
this is what I wanted to ask: just how far back do the problems go? 34 years ago, we're looking at the murder of Thomas Sankara. Blaise Compaoré himself, a finger pointed at him as being complicit in that. He himself took over as a result of a coup. And you mentioned the coups in Guinea and Mali, as well as Chad. So is Africa in general vulnerable to these perpetual military insurrections which result in coups? And I ask this against what has been written over the past couple of decades and longer, what has been seen as the Islamization of Africa. Where do the two connect, including the increasing levels of poverty and growing inequalities in Africa?
Yeah, I like the way that question is asked, because it recognizes the fact that there is a context that is missing from the conversation. And that context is, what you have in the last 10 years has been a deterioration of security, about 11 years actually, about a deterioration of security in West Africa as a whole. And that really started with NATO's deposition of Muammar Gaddafi. So what that really led to was a flow of weapons from or out of Libya that spread into the Sahel, arming militant groups in Agadez and northern Mali. We also saw that Boko Haram in Lake Chad Basin actually increased their capacity to strike state targets and even soft targets. And also in the Maghreb, we saw increase in militancy. That, while looking at just even academic research or even policy reports, it's very clear for everyone to see that singular act has been very, very detrimental to the security of West Africa. Now, if you contrast that, also if you add that to the context of growing poverty and unemployment in the same region, of course there was going to be a lot of agitation, because you have a young population, particularly in West Africa. The population is largely young in what you call employment is also fighting age. So if you're not educating these people, and there's a proliferation of arms and weapons, of course, and disgruntlement in terms of misrule and lack of life chances, then you have a ticking bomb or a powder keg. And then there's another element of this that really needs to be addressed, and that is the issue of democratization in Africa, where we see the ECOWAS and even the AU very quick to come out to condemn coups. Yeah, that is not the problem. But the attitude we've seen has not been comprehensive enough, or the approach rather to strengthening governance has not been comprehensive enough. So it's like you're trying to, like you have a problem of cholera, and you go around fighting individual cases of cholera. So there's school here, you go there and just sanction. There's school here, you go there and sanction. And then you ignore the water supply that is causing the people to have cholera. And water supply in this sense, in using that analogy, is the admixture of poverty, the proliferation and spread of Islamist ideology, and also small and light weapons in the region. So the AU and ECOWAS, they need to understand that you have to address the problems within these countries, because if, for instance, the AU has stepped up or the ECOWAS has stepped up to look at what's happening in Burkina Faso, for instance, and put a very strong statement or even encourage the government to do more, that will show some form of recognition of real structural problems. You cannot just wait till when these coups happen and then you come out. So the AU and particularly the ECOWAS, someone acts like a trade union for the president. They just come to you've attacked our member, you have to restore him back to power. You can't do that. So there's a huge rethinking that has to go into issue of democratization and governance.
I hope we find time to discuss that at some point, including what I would have loved to hear is your point of view of the role of France, as some Burkinabe have directed their anger towards France. You remember that France has deployed many of its troops in the Sahel region. So that there was Ovigwe Eguegu. He is a political analyst and policy analyst as well, speaking to us about what has happened in Burkina Faso. There has been a coup, even though the president has denied it. His whereabouts are not known at the moment, but we understand that he is safe.